these moments that become truly transformational are out there. But I think you need to be ready. So you need to do the work, the internal work, to prepare yourself to when that input comes in or that moment transpires, that it clicks for you and creates that change inside of you.
Welcome to Happiness for Humanity. I'm Rania Badreldin, the Happiness Consultant from Egypt. Join me and my guests for an hour of meaningful conversations for a happier world. Joining me today is Omar Samra. Omar is an adventurer, entrepreneur, and speaker. He's the first Egyptian to climb Mount Everest, the 7 summits, and ski to both the geographic South and North poles. Omar, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, Rania. Thank you so much.
It's nice. I'm happy to have you here, and I've been following you for a very long time, and I just feel like your life is full of life, actually, with everything that life brings. So that includes, all the good stuff that we want, like we want to have love and joy and happiness. At the same time, it's inevitable part of life. There's going to be grief. There's going to be hardships. There's going to be struggles. And I think through your adventures, you kind of experience that. I really wanted you to come on to the podcast because it's Happiness for Humanity, something that I feel humanity suffers from, actually lack of happiness. On an individual level, many of us are working towards what happiness means to us, how to achieve more fulfillment in our lives, how to navigate the challenges of life. And at the same time, as a collective humanity, we're very far removed from the word happiness. There's just so much happening that is either unjust or just, really unjust, I think would be the first word that comes to my mind. So that's what this podcast really is for, is to talk about happiness on an individual level, which is important because humanity is made up of individuals, but also a global, more humanitarian level. So anyway, I want to give you the floor. I'd love to have you just talk us through slightly your adventures and maybe what they taught you about the adventure of life itself.
Yeah, I mean, talking about my adventures even slightly may take up the whole time, but I can answer the second part for sure, which is, my adventures, my pursuits, going and doing these, challenging things in remote locations since an early age has definitely been like my companion through life and sort of my learning journey. It's definitely equipped me to deal with, to go through life, but also deal with some of, some challenges that were thrown my way. It was also a coping mechanism as well at certain points in time to be able to survive. And, the interesting thing is that, those same skills that I learned in order to be able to navigate through these very harsh environments served me at some point, but then sometimes the things that serve you at a certain phase of your life cease to serve you, and then you need to discover a new way of being, which has been kind of my journey since my last big adventure, which was in 2017 when I attempted to row across the Atlantic Ocean. So it's been like a staple and feature in my life, these adventures, and they've guided me a lot. And it's been interesting how my relationship has sort of changed over time while doing these adventures, but also how my relationship has changed with these adventures over time as well.
Yeah, because they obviously taught you a lot. I mean, and I think that's very powerful because you touched upon something important that we need to all be aware of, is that the same things that work for us at some point in life aren't going to be the same things that always work for us. So we're in a constant state of change, and our values even and our desires or our goals are going to evolve with us. And so sometimes the same coping mechanisms or things are going to change in terms of what's going to work or not work for us. And that's an important thing, I think, to remember. I can only imagine the kind of mental power and resilience that it will take to climb all those summits or to row across the sea like that. It must come with many moments. I mean, I'm asking you, of course, I don't know, but I'm imagining it comes with many moments of, well, joy and fulfillment. At the same time, maybe loneliness, sometimes lack of confidence, sometimes boosts of confidence, certainly fear of the future, or at least acknowledging that the future is unknown. That must really like hit you in the face when you're trying to go, row across the sea. And it's certainly, it's like life, because the future has always been unknown. It's never been known. It sometimes feels scarier than other times, but we've never known what the future will be about. And I think one of the greatest life lessons is to be not attached, to be disattached from what might happen, and just to focus,
Yes.
on what we're doing today. I suppose you must have built a lot of those skills up during those adventures, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with these adventures, I think what you need to have is you need to have a belief in yourself. You need to have a belief in something greater than yourself. You need to be able to defy the odds. Like when you do subscribe to these things, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to line up to tell you like that you are wasting your life, or you're doing something frivolous or too dangerous, or whatever else, like fill in the blank. So you got to have to be steadfast. This is not one of these things where you're going to say, oh, I'm going to do this, and immediately it's going to be celebrated and people are going to encourage you to do it. At least when I was embarking on doing these things, like I climbed Everest back in 2007. I started doing these different adventures earlier than that. And it was kind of a lonely place, at least back home. There wasn't many people doing that. I think it's become a little bit more mainstream now. So I didn't have necessarily like a benchmark or someone that I can go to, or sort of an example of somebody who looked like me that has done this and things worked out, right? Or didn't, or to learn from their mistakes. I had to kind of discover things on my own. So it was an interesting journey. And also you need to have a good level of naivety as well. I think if you know everything that goes on with these things ahead of time, you probably wouldn't, sign up to a lot of these things. And so the naivety comes from also maintaining this like childlike enthusiasm inside. So, being kind of innocent enough to believe in the magnitude of your dreams, like being on a plane, looking outside and seeing the vast ocean, and then having an idea pop in your head. How amazing would it be to cross that ocean without a motor or a sail? And then just being crazy enough to say, well, maybe I should give it a go. And that's the only way to find out. That's not necessarily like a very normal sort of A to B. But it does become like that when you've done it so many times and you've sort of honed that skill, where sometimes when you want to do something and that thing is not something that you can explain away, it's not logical to go spend 2 months to climb a mountain and stand on a piece of real estate, the size of this table at the end of the day, or to go to the North Pole just to have this feeling that you've imagined of standing on the top of planet Earth and having the whole planet rotate under your feet, even though you're not going to actually feel it, but just so that you have to romanticize a lot of these things. And that also you're inspired by that. You're inspired by like tales of people before you that have done similar things, and you kind of want to feel like your life is you live your life as if it was a story that you would one day read about. Like I would always read about these people, and it would, I would be really inspired. And I thought, like, why can't my life be similar to that? Of course, I ended up quitting a corporate job that was the antithesis of this, and so I often gravitate towards extremes. I mean, my passion to do kind of things that seem, maybe to the average person as dangerous pursuits, I think in some way is also related to how protective my mother was of me when I was very young. for obvious reasons. I had, two special needs sisters. I was the first sort of non-special needs kid in the family, and so she became extremely protective over me. And so, part of this was also sort of a rebellion towards this place. But ultimately, like, it's interesting when we're talking about coping mechanisms, and this is stuff that I can see now that I kind of reflect on as I get older, which is, there are certain coping mechanisms that are, vilified, or like, it's easy kind of to point out and say that's not a good thing. People getting sort of like getting addicted to drugs, or getting addicted to pornography, or getting addicted to, like any sort of like abusive kind of, or very clearly like negative behavior. Less so, for example, people becoming like a workaholic. That's kind of now becoming, now there's a bit of a rise against sort of that type of hustle culture. But then you look at these types of adventures that we do, and that is something that went from being something that people do not understand it, and in our parts of the world sort of like put it down, to getting to a place when it's massively like celebrated. And so when it is celebrated, and obviously there's nothing wrong with having a coping mechanism, but when it is celebrated, then it becomes much harder to identify that that what is actually happening, that you are in fact you can be moving towards something, but at the same time running away from something else. It's not binary, it's not one or the other. You can be doing the two things at the same time. And so, and also sometimes life is so heavy, and I've had my share of like pain and loss and everything, that you do need to be able to handle the level of sort of hardship that you're dealing with in bite-sized chunks that you can manage. And so being kind of conscious of that, and picking your poison, or your coping mechanism, or the way that you're going to deal with that is, changes from one person to the other. So looking back, I can see that I learned so many useful skills from these adventures. I saw so many beautiful places. I created so many lasting bonds, because when you go through these experiences with people, you become like really, very, really close. But I can see that, for 15 years, I had sort of been living my life in such a way where there was always a dragon that I wanted to slay somewhere out there. Like there was always an existential kind of thing that, and it was like going from one challenge, one dragon that I needed to slay, to the next, to the next, to the next. Sometimes not even stopping in between to kind of take in the experience, and so on, and also you start to, once you start to become identified as this human being, or that becomes your identity, and always also people expect that of you. And then it's sort of like, until today, like, whenever I meet anyone in a social environment, the first question I get is like, so what's your next thing, And so when you're younger, you're like, okay, maybe I need to have what the next thing, what is it? I need to come up with it. And you go on this kind of continuous drive, until one time you realize, I still love, obviously being in the outdoors and challenging myself in this way, but also something's changed. I don't feel the need to keep pushing for one thing after the other. And maybe instead of becoming the warrior, maybe I also need to embrace the identity of the artist. So, when you're talking about a warrior is somebody who is essentially playing a finite game in an infinite universe, because there isn't an end to these dragons. They're just gonna keep coming up. And essentially you start to manifest your life in a way where you're actually manifesting the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Then to embrace a notion where you're playing an infinite game in an infinite universe, which is the way of the artist, which is you're essentially your biggest challenge is just to be present and to be. And obviously you need to have, I think, a little bit of both, because there are certain situations in life where you need to become the warrior, when you need to compartmentalize whatever it is that you're feeling right now to be able to survive, and then lock it in a box and sort of put it aside to make sure that you are able to then find that box again when the time is right and open it and deal with it. So interestingly, like for me, the last few years have been one of sort of being lost and then trying to find myself again, which is a pattern that I believe, at least for myself, and I'm trying to understand whether this is similar for everyone or is just unique to certain people based on their character or how they're put together. But that it seems to me that every 7 or 8 years, there is definitely an urge to kind of let go of who you once were and embrace a new identity. And then if you don't do that, then you are somehow doing yourself a disservice.
Wow. Yes, I hear you. Actually, I don't think everybody does that. I think some people aren't aware enough that we aren't stuck with who we were, and and that we can just change what we're doing and take on new identities. Not everybody is empowered enough, or I mean, everybody has the power, but not everybody is aware enough. Hey, I'm not stuck with wearing these same hats that I've been wearing, or being the same persona that other people perceive me to be. I can do what I want to do, and I can change my mind whenever I want to change it. That's not something many people embrace. I think many people just feel like, okay, that's it. I am this. It's like a label, and therefore that's it, and I'll just be that way. So I think it's wonderful to allow oneself to decide, what do I actually want? And it might be very different from what I've been doing for 15 years. What's true to me? What's meaningful and purposeful to me, irrespective of what anybody else expects of me, and to actually make those shifts. I think that's a fantastic thing to do. I personally did that, actually, because for the longest time, I don't know if you remember, but we were in touch many years ago for Mother and Child. So I had founded, and I was, founder and CEO of Mother and Child, which was a magazine and then a digital platform. But it was very similar, actually, because since I was, I guess, 21 or something, and for like 20 years or more, I was Mother and Child. So I'm Rania Badreldin, whatever, a parenting guru, I don't know what. And after a while, I didn't realize it then, but it was just too much. I didn't want to just be that. But I found it hard to break away from that, because it was my baby. It's, this is who I am. I used to say that's who I am, but it isn't. And I think that's a very key point. What we do in life every day, when we wake up to choose to be and do. So I think it's a being and doing always kind of thing. It's not our identity. It's what we're choosing to be and do on any given day. And that can evolve, and we can evolve. And it was freeing and liberating to not be Mother and Child anymore. Yeah. I delegated a lot, and I still love it. And I still, I believe in everything that we did and are doing, but I don't want to be doing it myself. Yeah. And that's when I actually did the deep inner work, which I probably did it like intensively in like a few months. And you seem to have been doing the inner work through all those adventures, because I think that's what it's all of the self-reflection and letting go of like limiting beliefs and moving away from doing things out of rebellion and doing them more out of meaning to you, because that's a journey as well. And I think that sounds like that's what you've been doing. And it's very freeing and liberating to decide that, no, I'm just going to live life on my own terms. I think you were talking about that once on Instagram. And I think that's when I decided, hey, I want to have a conversation with Omar, because you were talking about living your life on your own terms. That's such an important concept. I mean, we are here, it's us, it's life. And yes, of course, it's our own terms.
And it's not easy, because the entire system of the world is built to have you do like to not be able to do just that, right? Everything is designed in that way. So in order to be able to live life in your own terms, you really have to break like out and away, and it's never going to come easy, and it's not going to make sense. And so people who are constantly trapped in their minds and their heads, and they only know how to make decisions from that place, will never be able to truly break through, because your brain is your brain is basically very good at, well, it's designed to keep you safe and out of trouble. And so if you have a certain decision of a certain thing you want to do, you want to quit your job and do this thing, you want to go travel the world, you want to, write a book, you want to do something that is a calling, but doesn't necessarily make sense from a, logical perspective. And you think, no matter how much you think about it, and if you kill it to death with like kind of logic, you're never going to be able to make a decision to do that thing, because from where you're standing, if you make a pros and cons list, the list of cons will be 10 times longer than the pro list, because you are only able to access the pros of any certain decision once you yourself have fully embraced that new identity and you become that person and have shared that new identity and presented it to the world. Then people are going to be like, oh, Rania is the happiness consultant, right? So when I have something to do with that's the person I'm going to come to, right? But otherwise, if you haven't presented yourself and taken that leap of faith and presented yourself to the world like that, people are going to still see you as, the parenting guru, and they'll be like, oh, well, maybe that's not going to be something that's very interesting for her, and they're going to contact someone else. And obviously, also a lot has to be said for, how it feels to you as well. Like once you've made that decision and you take that leap of faith, I always say that like it's called a leap of faith because your brain can only take you to the edge of the cliff, but it will never allow you to jump. And so to jump, you're going to have to rely on something else, whether you want to call it your intuition, your gut, your heart, something else that you have to do. And fortunately, the many, the lots of time that I've spent in nature, I was fortunate to have a lot of time in solitude. A lot of the times feeling very uncomfortable, because unfortunately, one of the prerequisites of most of the time of being able to break away and doing something different is to embrace the discomfort and be in it. And it's also the same reason why we stay trapped in our realities even long after we know that they don't serve us, is because we are afraid to death of being uncomfortable and afraid that this feeling of discomfort will last and we will have made a bad decision that we were not able to backtrack from.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's also, what's also true though, we're afraid of the discomfort, and we're afraid of what we don't know will happen if we make a change. But the thing is, it's not, we're not stuck in that either. We could actually change our mind. I mean, if we take any move in a direction that we think serves us better, and then we change our minds, we can change our minds again. I mean, it's not like we're not stuck in stone. I think what we're saying here really is, if you feel it's aligned with you, and you feel called to, or whatever, make a change, then you just go for it, and then you kind of learn along the way, and then you can adjust accordingly. But being stuck out of a fear of what might be, I think, is probably one of the most dissatisfying places to be. It's quite satisfying to take any action and then, learn from that action what you want to do next, kind of thing, which I guess this is kind of what you're doing now. That's what I've been doing. And I definitely feel much more free, much more aligned with my purpose in the last 8 years than I ever did before. You mentioned the word naive, and I love the way you brought it up, because you mentioned it as a positive thing. I was always, I wasn't made to feel anything, of course. Nobody can make you feel anything, but I always felt like people thought I was too naive, and you're my second guest on the show, actually, who is talking about being naive as a positive thing. And I love that, because you know what? I think the world needs more of that. I think it's enough of this whole, this ego kind of thing and this macho thing. And look where we are globally. Imagine if we were more naive, if we just followed our gut instincts more, and if we also did that with integrity, and if we also did that with kindness and compassion to ourselves and to other people, I think we can imagine a world that is healthier, a lot healthier than the one we currently have. Yeah. So that's a very important thing to be talking about as well. And I think I wanted to do this podcast to have meaningful conversations about important things. I feel that there's so much out there, with the internet and stuff. There's a lot of people talking about a lot of things. Some of them are very important, and I find them very meaningful. And then there's a lot of, all the light, fluffy stuff. I just think, I don't know. I mean, if people can just get together for an hour conversation every once in a while and talk about what really matters to ourselves individually and to the state of the world, that's really the point. And I think it's important to have those conversations, or even to disagree, but to be working towards a vision for ourselves and for everybody on the planet that is healthier, that is more just, more free, more peaceful, more loving, more compassionate, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems there is that, and especially for men, and especially for our part of the world, is that we don't necessarily feel comfortable sharing our vulnerabilities and sharing our emotions. We're obviously haven't been wired this way from childhood, because we grew up obviously, like, either idealizing or looking at our fathers, our parents in general. And this wasn't a generation, the boomers generation wasn't a generation that really put a lot of weight on kind of feelings and so on. There was a lot of it was a lot about stoicism, like, you just kind of need to put on a brave face and get on with it. That was the thing that was celebrated. And maybe there was a time for that, and that time has passed. Obviously, this is like an ailing race. Like, the human race is now crippled with all kinds of I think it's, if we're looking at what's happening in the world today, at least on a political level, it's rotten to the core. If you look at just generally, like, people are unhappy, people are not fulfilled, people feel that they're just stuck they're a cog in the machine. And bringing it down to just the day to day and like my own kind of personal life, I can see that, as I see this around me. It's certainly true in my own life. You have a lot of friends, from school, from university, from work, from different things. But men in our part of the world seem to have a difficulty connecting on a kind of a deep sort of soul level. I mean, men generally meet and they talk. Maybe they'll talk about how work's going, how life's going. They'll catch up on maybe sports and a few, I don't know, the stock market, topics of interest. But it's kind of rare when there is moments when people are really talking about their feelings and feel that they can be vulnerable. Maybe because they feel that the person in front of them is already burdened by a lot, that there is no time for that. Maybe they feel that it takes away something from them to show up in that way. And so actually recently, one of the things that I've been doing is that I joined a men's group, which is just a group of guys that we meet once a week, and we talk and we just check in with each other, and we try and be honest. And it's amazing, and because this group is like people from different parts of the world, and we couldn't be more different in terms of like ethnicity or where we are from in the world, but we're all struggling with the exact same things. And it's been such a something that's been so helpful for me, just to have other men that are able to hold space for me, and for me to learn how to do the same for them. And then I've been trying to use that experience with my own circle of friends, and trying to reach out and say, you know hey, I will confess, I'm very bad at keeping in touch with friends. And it's also, I spent 10-15 years chasing a lot of these adventure goals and dreams. And so during that time, I was so consumed with my journey, as I should have been, to be able to do these things, but also took me away from a lot. So I missed a lot of, like, friends gatherings and trips and things and so on. And so when I do connect, I'll see that people connect, but they don't connect on as deep a level as I feel that they should. And so when I always feel conscious to reach out to people, because I haven't been in touch as often as I should have been for a very long time. But when I do, and I invariably, people welcome it. Like, if I say, like, if I feel that someone is going through a hard time, and I just reach out to them and say, would you like to jump on a call, or would you like to, to meet and have a talk? You would be surprised how many people will take you up on that. And I think as men, I think we need to be sometimes prompted to share, until we get to a place where we're very comfortable sharing and we can do that readily. I also found that it's very challenging for us to be in our bodies, and to be able to like somatically feel what it is that's going through, and and then therefore to be able to understand, like, if I'm what I'm feeling in my body, what is the emotion that's being carried with that, and what does that mean, and how I can work with that. That's something that I've been personally trying to like work with and trying to get better at. But I understand that this sort of like survival mechanism and that pressure to, constantly be on the go and everything requires us to abandon ourselves in some ways and to remove ourselves from that, because the more that we can feel, we feel that if we feel so much, then that will cripple us, and then we will not be able to get on with what it is that we need to get on with. And there is some truth to that, in the sense that if you start to feel a lot, then it can overwhelm you, and it can then reduce your creativity or productivity or everything else. But the cost of not doing that is huge, because then it really affects your relationships. Obviously your relationship with yourself, but then also your relationship with very close people. And the signs will then show, later on when things have become quite strained, and then it becomes like harder to put the pieces back together. And so, yeah, I don't think enough men are talking about that, at least in our part of the world. I know there is a wave now of that, or like globally, not enough, but it's happening. But a lot of healing needs to happen in the world, and that needs to happen like with everyone. But I think there's something to be said for women connecting with women, and men connecting with men. Obviously men and women to connect as well, but it's really important to have your own kind of camaraderie, like kind of support system that you can go to, and that you can, like, this very kind of non-judgmental space where you can just be yourself and be able to express your concerns. And I'm talking also outside of, like, therapy and so on. That's also like important for whoever needs it to do that. But I'm talking about something else also. I'm talking about like friendship and that kind of brotherhood, or that kind of these type of close relationships that you can cultivate with people like you.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I think you're right that men are kind of wired in a certain way, especially here in our part of the world. And they just have to, they feel like they just need to be doing. Certainly they weren't conditioned to be vulnerable and to show emotion and to talk about feelings. But men are human beings too. So it's really very simple. Men are human beings, and all human beings are going to have emotions, and it's such an important part of our well-being to acknowledge and to feel our emotions and to talk about our emotions. Yet, yes, you're right. For some reason, men feel like that's not something we talk about. You don't see guys hanging out and talking about, oh, I felt this today, I felt this today. But why not? They're human beings, and they have all the emotions inside them. So to have to always mask and to have to always put on this sort of brave face is just, I think, unreasonable. It's a lot of pressure on a lot of men. So I think, having a group where you can non-judgmentally be yourselves, for anybody, that's a very valuable thing. So I'm glad you found that. And I think the idea is slowing down enough to recognize that you need that we would benefit from that. It sounds like we have the same thing where like we're just running. You were doing it through adventure. I was doing it mostly through entrepreneurship. You're doing both, I guess. But there's a lot of similarities between the loneliness of being an entrepreneur and the risk taking and the kind of the craziness of just going for your ideas. And there's a lot of parallels there. But for the longest time, I too was just like, I just felt I was running. In fact, I'll tell you this tiny story, but I felt like I was running in front of a train for the biggest part of my life. And I remember once I was saying the story, and I was saying it really proudly. And I was like, oh yeah, I feel like I'm running in front of this train. And sometimes I wish it would just run over me and get it over with. And, you know, it would be over with. And afterwards, when I looked back at what I said, I realized how unhealthy, what kind of a statement is that? To be running in front of a train and to sometimes wish that it would just run you over. It just shows the kind of mindset I was in, that like I had to prove something and I had to be doing things to be good enough. And then fast forward just a few months later, after I had really done that sort of intensive inner work, and I realized what was I saying? No judgment. I think whatever stage we were and whatever choices we were at the time that was the best we could do. So I don't think we should judge ourselves, even if we missed out on friendships. Because by the way, I'm exactly the same. I was like, I care about people, but I'm not the kind of person who gets in touch with people, you know, and I'm very much just alone, and you know, I'm fine with that. So I can see a lot of parallels there. But I came to a realization one day that, oh my goodness, instead of running in front of this train, Rania, just stop, go out, get in the train and sit in the front row, sit in your favorite seat, and just enjoy the train journey, and then bring people on board with you. And that can be your journey. And that kind of has been that shift that I had, to just slow down, stop running. I think dare enough to slow down enough to deal with the thoughts in one's mind and the things that might come up that aren't so comfortable. And then they become more comfortable when they come out and you deal with them. And so I think being in nature must have been a healing tool for you, whether at the time you were aware of that consciously or it was more of a, I need to do this kind of thing. I think it was a platform for healing, because there must be this magnificence, this awe of being in, you know, in this setting that's so much grander than yourself. And it must as well have sort of been like a spiritual and a healing journey for you, I think, to get you now to where you are today. And I think whatever got us to where we are today, we kind of need to take it as a whole package, you know. So yeah, I focused on some things and I let go of others. That's fine. What does that mean to me today? And what do I want to do today differently? Which seems to be exactly what you're talking about. Noticing what worked, what didn't, what you want to do differently. Because some people ask this question, like, if you were to do things differently. I never asked that question. I mean, I could ask you that if you want, but I just never asked that question, because I just feel like it is the way it was, so for us to be where we are today, and that's good enough. And then from there we move forward. So I never look back at life with regrets, even if there are things that I messed up and I wish I hadn't done, but I know that I learned from them. So you know what I mean? How do you feel about that? Do you feel, and that's fine, if you feel like you know, do we look back at our lives with regret, or do we look back at it as, you know, we accepted the way it was? What's your take on that?
No, I mean, I think you have to accept it the way it is. I think whatever decision that you made is, you just have to live with. Sometimes sometimes you'll make a decision, or you'll, you know, act a certain way in a certain circumstance where you feel that you have let yourself down, that maybe you could have done better, and acting in that way, you know, cost you something or made you lose something. That can obviously be difficult to come to terms with and deal with. So that type of situation is harder than you know, than another situation when you've just kind of made a mistake because you just didn't know any better. But in all cases, you have to be able to let it go. And then the thing is, with letting go, it's, you know, sometimes it can be a process, but sometimes it also can be immediate, because ultimately you can let it all go. It's a choice, and you can do it in an instant. So sometimes you can be stuck with something for weeks, months, maybe even years, and then something happens, or something that you hear, or something triggers you in a certain way, and it clicks, and then you let go. You decide, for example, that I don't want to hold on to all of this resentment, for example, I've been carrying about this person or this thing or whatever, and I just don't want to live this kind of life anymore. And you just let it go, even though you've been grappling with it for like years. And it could be you've just and what triggered you to do that could have been something that you'd heard before in many different ways, but you had to hear it in a specific way, or you had to hear it from a specific person said in a different way, or you had to read it in a book or watch it in a movie or see it on a sign while you were walking in the street. These moments that become truly transformational are out there, but I think you need to be ready. So you need to do the work, the internal work, to prepare yourself to when that input comes in or that moment transpires, that it clicks for you and creates that change inside of you.
Yes, very, very well put. So let's talk about you today. How do you incorporate happiness habits in your day? I've seen a little bit of your stories, so I have an idea of some of the routines or things that you might do. And do you do them as routines, or are you more of a, I'm more spontaneous? I mean, how do you navigate just day-to-day life?
Yeah, I mean, I made a decision almost a year ago to move out of the capital, to move out of the city, Cairo, and move to the Red Sea. So I live now, um, you know, in a place called Soma Bay, which is near Safega by the Red Sea. I can see the sea right now from where I'm sitting, and just being able to get out of my place and just walk a few steps, and I can see the sky, and I have this like connection with nature, has been invaluable. Um, but obviously, like, also being in this magical place doesn't mean that you're kind of like immediately like happy, right? It's something that you have to work on a daily basis. There's still going to be stress, there's still going to be challenges, and so I have developed like a set of habits that I try to maintain on most days. That doesn't always happen, and I think I went through a process when I thought that the routines that I had developed for myself is the work, and realizing actually that's not the work. That is just like the inner work. I mean, so just realize that that's just things that you need to do in order to be able to create, the right environment for the work to take place. And so I think a lot of people get fixated on the habits, on the things that they need to do, whether it's meditation or whether it's breath work or, you know, exercise or whatever else. That in itself is not the actual work. I think the work is something that is in essence a bit more nuanced than this, and a bit harder than this, which is that you need to kind of really embrace like who you are and really understand who you are, which is a culmination of all of the years that you've been on this planet, and certainly very much skewed towards your early years. Um, who you were as a child, how your relationships with your parents like molded you and informed how you deal with things and so on. And a lot of people, when they go through this journey, they can sometimes be resentful of the past and even of their parents. But I think it's important to realize that everybody that came, that you crossed in your life, was also doing their best. Like, even if in some cases they were not necessarily showing up in the right way, but that's the best way that they could show up at that point in time. And everyone has their own story, and everybody has stuff going on that you probably don't know about because we just don't ask. And so it's also being able um to try and understand, like, okay, I get anxious or I get fearful in these types of situations, but like why, and then sort of like dig a little bit deeper, and then to realize that, sometimes your relationship with a certain thing is very, very deep, many, many, many years ago in some situation, and you're gonna have to be able to shine a spotlight on that situation, to be able to kind of detach of that association, that emotional association, and it's much easier said than done. But I think having the awareness that this is something that we all need to be working on, and certainly if you're in a relationship, um, I mean, we're all in relationships in general. So even if you're not in a romantic relationship, you're still in a relationship with your siblings, with your parents, with your friends. But certainly, if you are in a romantic relationship, that means that someone that you're living with and interacting with on a daily basis for many hours. Um, it certainly doesn't work if one person is doing this work and the other one isn't. And it has to be, because the more you do this, the work, I think the more you expect of the other person, in terms of how they show up for themselves, and then the way they show up for themselves is going to determine how they show up for you. So, and in that type of work, then it really pays off to be, living somewhere like here, for example, for me at least, because at least there isn't, I can be plugged out of the rat race, or like the hamster wheel of things that, like, I didn't realize like how wired I was all the time until COVID forced me to stop, because I work in tourism, and so literally my business went, from being very successful to a week later losing kind of 95% of the business, and that lasted for many months. And so it's not like things slowed down, they almost came to a halt, and there was nothing to do. It wasn't like, oh, just need to hustle, like, and get more business. There was literally nothing happening, so I couldn't do anything but just stop. And then when I did, then and I then realized like how much I was actually like doing, and carrying all the time. And especially then when sort of COVID started to subside, and then I had to think about restarting things again, then I realized like, wow, like there is no way that I can go back to that same place. Neither do I want to go back to that same place. And unfortunately, I think that was COVID was a disastrous time for me, because I also lost both my sisters, and my wife lost both her grandparents, and there was obviously a lot of heartache around. But it was also a beautiful moment in time where what I just explained happened, and it's sad to me that the world has kind of moved on, in a way as if that moment of history never kind of happened, and we're kind of back to just chasing things almost in a way that is, um, that is more intense than it was before. um, and it should have also been, you know a reflection on sort of like I want to say like how, how life basically how life is very fragile, and like can disappear in an instant, and that the most important thing is to cherish kind of love and understanding between people, and to be good to each other and so on, which is, obviously it's something that the world also hasn't learned from. um so yeah, I think like how you started when you were first introducing the episode, I think it is a difficult time, and I think it's going to continue to be this challenging world. And I think those of us who have the awareness and consciousness to be able to see like the malady that is around us, I think we have to do something about it. Like, and not necessarily in a grand kind of way. Like, most of us, like, we can't like change the world, but we can kind of we do have some impact on like the environment, the close environment around us. And so, if we can impact, just a few people around us, whether it's even our family or our friends, or, like you said, to do something meaningful, so that like our actions like mean something. And I think if we all can do that, or if we can have that approach, I think it will go a long way.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, if we're talking about being naive, because yeah, why not? We can also dare to think that we can have an impact on changing the world, because I think our greatest impact will be on our immediate circles, as you're saying, our families, our friends. But we also have voices, and with technology having advanced the way it has, we can also spread those voices using our platforms, using whatever tools we have available, to actually have an impact on the world and be part of the change. That idea of being the change you want to see and all of that. I mean, if you look now at things like the student movements that are happening worldwide for Gaza, those are just individuals deciding that they do have the power to be part of the change that they want to see. And so I think, to me, the solution is inner work, number one. So absolutely, inner work in whichever different ways. And as I totally agree with what you're saying, it's not about the actual way, it's about finding the way that works for you. So whether it's meditation, or whether it's like, hypnotherapy, or whatever, somatic healing, or whatever different modalities, let's say, these are the ways to reach your inner self, so that you can let go of what needs to be let go of. Stop carrying heavy burdens and
Yeah.
things like grudges and resentments and things, and just let go of those, and let go of limiting beliefs, things that somebody said sometime that you took to be facts, that are not serving you and are not serving humanity. Just let go of the labels, let go of so much. And then I think what will be left is beauty and goodness and kindness and inner truth. So that's number one. And then number two is, to the best of our abilities, to spread that from here outwards as far as we can. And without judgment as well, because for some of us, depending on where we are in our lives and what struggles we have, our best may be just spreading it to our kids. And that's our best right now. We also, I mean, as much as I want people to stand up and be true to themselves, to find that inner voice and to stand up and use it for the good of us all, as much as I understand that we can't be judgmental of that as well, because sometimes I've had a few years of my life where my best was just making it to the reclining chair, to just numb myself with Netflix for the day, because that was my best. You know what I mean? And at other times, I'm in a better place and I can do a lot more. So I don't need people judging me as well. I'm not talking about me, but I mean, I don't need us to be judging each other based on, but you didn't talk about this, you didn't talk about that. We can encourage each other, and we can empower each other to believe that we are capable of achieving more. At the same time, if we want a world that is non-judgmental and compassionate, then we kind of need to be modeling that as well. So yeah, it's just a mess, honestly. I like to have these conversations, maybe as a way for me to figure out, what can we do? I mean, like, what can we actually do? I've come to the conclusion that what we can really do is work on ourselves, and then do our best to spread that outwards. I don't know if you have a different kind of conclusion that you reached. I can't think of anything else, because I think for people like you and me, probably we just like want to change things, and we want to change them quickly, because we can't stand what we're seeing, but then we can't, and then that's frustrating or depressing. So then either we're going to stay depressed or focus on what we can do. So that's kind of what I've been trying to do. Do you have something like to say about that? I mean, how do you think we can do better?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think you just have to, have to focus on the small things around you. and you have to, yeah, I think you have to be able to live your life in a certain way where you can look at yourself in the mirror and be happy with the decisions that you've made. um and I think it's easy in this type of world that we live in, which is to become very insular and basically be like, okay, I'm just gonna focus on myself and my family, and that's it. And obviously that's also extremely important. um However, like we can't turn a blind eye to injustice happening around us, and there is there's limits to what everybody can do because of like who they are, and their circumstances and where they are and everything. But I think everyone has to be doing something, and that something can look very different depending on, it could be something that's very obvious to other people, it could be something that's not. And but it's the relationship with the person, with himself or herself, um that they just need to feel that, that they're doing their best, and to honor who they are, and to honor their capacity as well, as we go through this, because it's a long road. I mean, nothing's going to change in an instant. It's kind of, in a way, it's been the way of the world for as long as it's been around, but it seems now that things are worse than they ever have been. Not just in my lifetime. I've had this conversation with my parents, with other people that are older, and it seems, things are seemingly like just worse than they have ever been, in terms of the state of the world and state of humanity. So it's it's certainly going back to the other stuff that we were saying about like our own self and our journey and our, like, doing, speaking our truth, or like living our truth and so on. It just becomes harder to do all of that in this environment, because you're grappling with so many things at the same time. And then if you have kids, or nieces or nephews, or like people that are like a younger generation that you are um connected to, you're also seeing how that kind of looks for them, and what is the legacy that we're leaving. And again, like you mentioned, the encampments happening in universities, and mainly in the States, but also all around the world. And that's a cause for hope. um and that's, again, this is like the good naivety that we're talking about, again, in a different way. Not naivety in the sense that it won't work. It has worked in the past, and it hopefully will work again, and it can work. But many of us who are older, who have tried to change the status quo and in different ways, and gotten sort of rejected and beaten down so many times, you only have so much like energy and drive towards that. And so um it's good to have this sort of like young, youthful energy that's kind of still unbridled by all of these things. And I think both are needed. Like all the generations, are important. Like we have the younger generation who are basically like holding the torch right now, and kind of paving the way and taking risks that other people are not necessarily able to take. um and then you've got people, senior people in the world and the populations, who hopefully, like, the good ones, have like the wisdom and the experience, and can see what works and what doesn't work from like past experience. And then those in between as well, who have a role. So it's definitely going to be an interesting time. And it's, if you are somebody who's going back to people who are going back to the idea of feeling things and not being numb through life, if you are able to do that, that becomes a very challenging place to live in, right? Because that's another thing that's forcing you to kind of numb. And so if you're, but you can't, the problem is that you, like, yeah, opening up yourself or closing yourself in terms of your heart, like opening it and shutting it, it's not, it's either you open it or you shut it. You know, you can say, I'm just going to open my heart to feel certain things, but I'm not going. And so knowing that when you open yourself, you are opening yourself hopefully to receive love, but you know that when you're doing that, you're also opening yourself to potentially being hurt a lot as well. And so you're going to have to, and so it's difficult, and it takes a lot of courage to be able to do that. So the easiest thing sometimes is just be like, let me just close off and numb myself, lean more into the head, and then just kind of protect myself. Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer. It's something that I grapple with and struggle with on a daily basis, and but it's important to, you know, to be aware of that at least, and to have these kinds of conversations, and to recognize that it is hard, and to recognize that some days you're going to be able to do it and some days you're not going to be able to, and that's okay as well. And if you can show up maybe more days than not, then, you know, that's definitely something. And if more people are doing that, then that's something even bigger. And yeah, and you can't lose sight of, like, hope that things can change to the better, because otherwise it's it's, you know, it's a grim reality, right? And also there's plenty of evidence to suggest that things can, you know, shift and can change, and old systems can be dismantled and new systems can come in its place. And you know, so yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there is hope, actually. I mean, some days I don't feel it.
Yeah.
But when I think about it, and I think that there has been change lately, in fact, the fact that people are talking about a cause like the Palestinian cause was not the case ever to this extent as globally. That already is a sign of change. I hope that that along with that comes some dismantling of some of these systems and people in power, and, you know, the people who are actually taking the decisions, because that's the real problem. And I think then other causes, because there's stuff happening across the globe that I'm not even fully aware of all of it, that we start to reduce or eliminate all injustice would be the goal, and actually learn to live together as human beings, you know, and actually respect all human beings and not certain ones over other ones, and you know, that kind of a narrative that we've been hearing. I think it is possible. I think the youth are really impressive right now in terms of their just ability to put themselves out there and to speak and to think and not necessarily be as conditioned as we were. And I think you're right that our different generations can play a role here, as long as the good people just, you know, do their best to be part of the change. I think we can hold on to the hope. Can you believe we've been talking for over an hour? Oh, wow. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
It passed quickly.
Yeah, I can see it now.
It's been, wow, it's been very, I enjoyed the conversation, and I think the audience will as well. I think we touched upon a lot of things. I think the answers are going to be inside each person. And I think one thing you said at some point, which is just finding the person inside, you know, if everybody can do that, that's where I think the hope is. And I think that's what's happening. I think it's, you know, something, you said something, and I don't even know, I've been thinking about it lately, whether things were better before, or are they really the worst that they've ever been now? Or could it be that they were a lot worse, but we're better, so we're not accepting it? Because don't forget, we lived at a time, I mean, there was a time when there was nuclear bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I don't know who it was, but some dude was in the States was like saying, what's the problem? We dropped bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and that was okay. Why can't we just do the same now? You know, and I was like, what? So for him, it's like, you know, what's wrong with you? Why are you increasing your standards? And I have a feeling that maybe things were worse, but we've changed so that we're not accepting it. And that actually is quite a hopeful thing, because I think they seem worse now because they're horrific. Of course, they're horrible. But I think it's because we see them in front of our screens and because we are refusing to accept to live at a time when that's okay. Because no, it's not okay. Even if it was done before for decades by these powers, no, it's not okay now. We don't want to live in a world now where that's okay. And I think that's a very powerful change. I just wanted to, maybe throw that out there as something to think about with hope. Anyway, last words to you, Omar, before we close this wonderful hour.
Nothing further to add. I think we covered quite a lot of things. I think it's I don't know, for people listening to this, I think, if they are like us and they're kind of like, struggling and confused about different things, I think to not to focus on the goal of whatever it is that you want to reach, but to focus on the process, and make that the goal. Because if that's the case, then you're not waiting until you reach that thing in order to be happy or to be pleased that you've achieved that thing. But you are able to then, get that feeling throughout, almost even many times every day, and then also not to be too hard on yourself, to understand that like the path from where you are to where you want to get to is not linear, and also that it's a never ending thing. So there's no point in really stressing out, because there's always going to be a next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And so the point, I think, is just to keep moving, and like progress, not perfection.
Thank you so much. This was fun. It was great. Everybody who's listening in, if you have any comments, questions, please send them in. Thank you so much, Omar.
You're welcome.
We'll be sharing this episode in a few days, actually. And I'm looking forward to maybe having you as a guest again sometime soon.
Inshallah. Thank you so much for reaching out, and do let me know when it's posted. I will definitely love to share it and engage with people, and obviously if they have questions.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Rania.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Join me every other Thursday for a new one. Happiness for Humanity is available on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms. If you found this episode valuable, please share it. Let's come together for a happier world.